Welcome to Citizens of Earth, podcast dedicated to life stories of travelers, expats, immigrants, and about impact that traveling experience makes on our worldview and our life. Hello everyone, you're listening to Citizens of Earth. My name is Alex, and today we're interviewing Andy. He's originally from US, but he used to live in Spain, Germany, Mexico and India, so it's very interesting how native US people perceive foreign cultures. Thank you for agreeing to interview Andy.
Of course, thanks.
So I'm really curious, what was it like to be in European environment for the first time? What differences you noticed between European mentality and US mentality? What struck you the most?
I think that when I lived in Spain, I went there as a 15-year-old. I grew up in and was born in California in the United States. And I think that when I got to Europe, the first thing that struck me was how mature the children were in the families. The host family that I lived with, there was 4 generations under one roof. We had great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, and those kids ranging in ages from 6 months all the way up to 80 years old. And the expectation was that even the kids that were in high school that were my age at the time, they were grown up and they were treated with respect like adults. And it was really different as opposed to my upbringing in California. My parents were really involved in my day-to-day life, drove me places. I expected them to take me around in their car. And when I got there, it was like, okay, there's the bus system. If you want to go do something, go figure it out. But there was still a lot of love, but it was just an expectation that we would take care of ourselves more on our own.
Okay, and how long did you stay in Spain?
So I was in Spain for 11 months. I spent my entire junior year of high school there. And the family I lived with didn't speak a word of English, so it really forced me to learn the language.
I see. How was it to be in a foreign language environment?
Well, I would say that it was a lot easier once I actually learned how to speak the language. I had taken a few years of Spanish in middle school and then 2 years in high school before I went. But learning Spanish in a California-based school, especially with the focus on Mexican Spanish and the slang that came out of there, because that's what's closest to us geographically, it was pretty funny. When I first arrived, I really learned how to laugh at myself because though my vocabulary was mediocre and I sort of knew sentence structure, most of the time I was catching maybe 40% of what was being said to me, and then I had a hard time actually responding. So
I know how it feels.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine so. But there was a lot of pantomiming, a lot of pointing, a lot of acting things out, and that lasted for about the first 3 or 4 months. And I could understand a lot more than I could speak. But then it was right after Christmas time that I was able to actually start speaking a little bit better and making more sense of it. So it was frustrating, but at the same time it was exhilarating. And I just had to learn to laugh at myself because I said some really stupid things and I didn't even know it.
Okay, and what was your next experience in foreign country? What was your next country?
So I came back senior year of high school and then went off to university. And then I ended up living my, when I was a junior in college and undergraduate, I had 2 more foreign experiences. One, I was working for a U.S. company that was based in Chicago, Illinois, but that had headquarters for Latin America in Mexico City. So I worked it out where I had a 3-month internship in Polanco in Mexico City, and I lived in Mexico State. And so again, I was able to use both my Spanish and my English there and to leverage what I'd learned in Spain to help serve the Latin American market. So I was working on projects that ranged all the way from Mexico down to Argentina and the Southern Cone. I was there for 3 months, and then I was headed off right after that to spend a semester in Bonn in Germany with my university. And their school system was on a different calendar schedule, so I got to live in Mexico up until the end of February, and then I moved to Germany in March of that year and stayed there for 4 months.
Did you really experience local life, or you were kind of isolated among people like you from foreign countries?
No, when I go to live abroad, I make a concerted effort not to spend time with Americans or Canadians, not for any lack of love for my countrymen in North America, but the whole point of living abroad is to actually experience another culture. So like my previous experience in Spain, when I moved to Mexico, I lived with a Mexican family that was affiliated with the company I was working for, but I lived there and was immersed in their family, the culture, the food, and kind of all of their traditions as well. So I like that a lot.
What differences did you notice about Mexican people and German people comparing to US people?
So the comparison between Latin American culture and German culture, how long is this podcast? Like 3 hours? Because I have a lot to say.
Try to pick something that struck you the most.
Yeah, well, it really runs along the lines of stereotypes. So kind of in warmer climates and Latin American climates and Spanish speakers in particular, it's just a very warm culture. There's a lot of hugging, laughing, humor, a lot of big family gatherings. And then when you get up into the northern part of Europe, it's kind of a colder climate, which lends itself to I wouldn't say the opposite of that, but much less so than in warmer kind of Latin climates. So it really boiled down to people's disposition. I would say that people in Mexico and especially Spain also were just outgoing, laughter, walking around. In Northern Europe, it's just a little bit more buttoned up. And that was the main difference for me.
I'm curious, like after you returned to US, with all this experience, did you get a new angle, a new perspective on some things in US? Like, did you start to look at something differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the first. So I would say it was back when I went to Spain. I was 15 years old, and it was the first time that I had really experienced news coverage about the United States through the lens of a foreign news agency. So of course it was available to me while I was living in the US, but I didn't think to ever look at another source of news. But what happened in Spain was that we had a chance to kind of laugh at the way that Americans kind of carried themselves internationally. Whereas there's a lot of kind of wealthy and powerful countries out there, I would say that it was the first time that I acknowledged, and it was pointed out to me, that America really exerts itself internationally. When you're living in the United States, based on the news coverage of our politics, you'd think that everybody on planet Earth really cares about what the United States is doing, and that's not the case. There is, other governments with other agendas, other cultures, and I guess it was just more of an appreciation that there was more out there than just what I perceived to be the universe of American politics and influence.
I believe you also had experience of living in India, right? I bet it was a huge social contrast of the US. So tell me, how was it for you?
So I was at an advantage actually moving to India. The area in California that I grew up in actually had a large Indian influence. So I had been introduced to the culture. I had friends whose grandparents lived at home who introduced me to the food, the language, the various languages of India. So it was still the most raw experience I've had living abroad, going to India, because there's just juxtaposition of wealth and poverty right next to each other. But what was interesting is I think that all my previous experiences living abroad really lent themselves to just keeping an open mind to everything that I saw in India. The underlying thing that was similar to my experiences in Mexico and Spain especially is that the Indian culture, it's a democratic society, so I could relate to the way that they perceive law and justice, but at the same time, the culture underlying everything there, it's a very open and warm culture, and it reminded me a lot in terms of the openness to foreigners and really showing affection and being a kind of an accepting and welcoming culture. That seemed very similar to what I had experienced in Latin countries, I should say.
Okay, and how long did you live in India?
So I've been to India, we were trying to count this the other day, but I think I've been there 6 times. And then in total, I've spent about 4 months there. And that was primarily, I went there twice for vacation, but then the other trips and then moving there was for starting a business. I'd started a software company while I was in my MBA program. And I moved there to act as a product manager for a team in Hyderabad in the south of India, in Andhra Pradesh. So yeah. So I've been there multiple times, but the total amount of time has just been only 4 months, but enough to get pretty exposed to the culture.
Okay, and before we end, last question. What would be your advice to people who want to live abroad or to start travel a lot but hesitating because it's scary and unfamiliar? What would you say?
I'd say go just because of those reasons. The most scary part and the getting over your discomfort for being in an unfamiliar territory. If you want to challenge yourself, you just have to go do it. Jokingly, I'd say for Americans, I think the statistic is that only 10% of us have passports. A good first step would be getting a passport and actually buying a ticket to go somewhere. But start small. You can go and start with an extended visit as opposed to actually moving to a place. But my advice is just go try it out and expect to make mistakes, and that you'll kind of muscle through it. And it always works out for the better, and it's a good set of experiences to have.
Okay, thank you, Andy, for answering our questions today. It was Citizens of Earth podcast. My name is Alex. Check out our feed on podmaniac.com, and I hope to see you next time.